Hello everyone, and welcome to my review of Assassin's Creed Unity. Now, I'm going to be upfront. I wasn't all that interested in Unity, even though I am a fan of the Assassin's Creed franchise. That's mainly because after the first 5 games being fairly iterative, I was among the people that found Black Flag to be an excellent change of pace, and I really enjoyed being a pirate and sailing the high seas. So, knowing that Unity was returning to the more traditional style of gameplay that we know Assassin's Creed 4 was a little disappointing to me, and it meant that out of the upcoming games, I was more interested in Assassin's Creed Rogue, because playing as a Templar this time around and getting more ship-focused gameplay sounded great to me. But since Rogue isn't due on PC until next year, I thought I might as well pick up and play Unity while I wait. But what I ended up getting was not what I expected. So if you've been following Unity at all since it's released, you likely already know that Unity has a lot of problems as far as optimization and stability go. Now, I pushed through to finish the game so I could bring you this complete review, but it wasn't easy. The first and most widespread problem with Unity is definitely the game's terrible optimization, and I do mean terrible. Maintaining the game's graphics at ultra or even just very high on PC with a playable and stable frame rate is almost impossible, even on very high-end machines. For example, my PC has a GTX 780 Ti in it, which is one of the best graphic cards from last year, and on Ultra I was unable to maintain 30 FPS as it would regularly dip into the 20s, and this is on a very powerful machine. So to have the game even be playable, I had to turn the graphics down to high, which had a noticeable effect on the game's visual quality, most noticeably the lighting and shadows, or set it on very high and turn off anti-aliasing and deal with all the jaggies. Now, even then, it would jump all over the place. There was like a 20 FPS swing from one area to the next. But this isn't just a problem happening on PC, it's the same on the console versions. They also can regularly dip below 30 FPS, so it's clear that Unity is poorly optimized across all the platforms, and it's easily among the worst I've ever seen from a AAA. But I suppose the first question that comes to mind with all these problems is the game really poorly optimized? Or does the game's graphical fidelity deserve the high performance demand? The answer to that is sadly no, because even on Ultra, which like I said is basically unplayable because of the frame rate, I would say it doesn't look that much better than Black Flag did on Ultra. I think that Unity has better lighting and shadows, but Black Flag had better overall texture quality, so it's a bit of a trade-off there. And while Black Flag also had optimization issues, in comparison it ran far better than Unity does. The game also suffers from numerous bugs and glitches, and this was the main impact on my enjoyment. They can range anything from floating NPCs to the game crashing repeatedly, entire buildings and sections of the worlds disappearing, and even the game failing to launch at all, just to name a few. It's a total mess right now, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, at least not at the moment. But most of those can and hopefully will be fixed in future patches along with the performance issues. I'm looking at you, Ubisoft. So if it is fixed, how is the game itself? Could it be worth your while? Well, firstly, let's talk about the setting, because it's the biggest departure from Black Flag and more of a return to the older Assassin's Creed games like Brotherhood or Revelations. So the game is set in one large city, more accurately Paris, so no boat sailing action here. Now, Unity is set during the French Revolution, so the city is in the middle of an uprising, with the different districts of the city representing this to different degrees, which was surprising. So some areas are relatively peaceful and untouched, while others will have the streets filled with burning rubble, with mobs of hundreds gathering for things like public executions or to riot. This combined with a good level of detail makes the city feel pretty realistic. But compared to the bright and colourful Caribbean, the city did feel bland and a little uninteresting. And while it may look fairly good, the power it demands to run it decently is just too much to be worthwhile. Another thing Paris's design was tied into was the game's difficulty, which was a nice surprise. So the districts within Paris scale differently according to the relative state they're in. So in the peaceful districts you'll have fewer enemies and they'll be less powerful. But in the rioting districts there'll be far more enemies and they'll be far more powerful. So you'll end up having to be careful about where you end up going, especially when dealing with these harder areas, as you can die very easily even in a one-on-one fight. And I really liked this change because of the challenge it brought, trying to get through these high risk areas and fighting these high level enemies early on. It was in fact so difficult that in the end I just tried to get around undetected, as I didn't want to get into any fights that I didn't need to. And this was really good because I actually cared about being stealthy and playing like an assassin for the first time in forever, because let's be frank, Assassin's Creed has always been pretty easy. And it was nice to do this, not because I could, but because I actually needed to. There was actually a risk that if I got detected, I was going to be very easily killed. But by a third of the way through the game, this will no longer really be a thing you can do, because you will have leveled up and gotten better gear and most likely be back to your unkillable guard slaughtering self like the previous game, which was a bit of a disappointment as I was enjoying playing this new way. You know, sneaking because I had to sneak, not because I just could. But anyway, next up is the combat. Now if you've played any Assassin's Creed game up to date, you'll be pretty familiar with the majority of the combat. It's mostly focused around sword fighting, with supplement tools like bombs, pistols, hidden blades, wrist bows, and other things supplementing your fighting style. But there are a few changes in Unity. First up, the combat looks really good. The animations are really well done. I think it's the best of any Assassin's Creed game to date, as it flows together really well and looks very natural. However, the speed of the combat has been reduced in what I have to assume is an attempt to give it more weight and impact. The problem is that we don't get either. There's nowhere near enough audio or visual feedback to make it effective. So while it might look good, it doesn't feel good to play. And I ended up preferring the old style over this new one, as I went back and did some combat in Black Flag, and this just felt slow and clunky in comparison. But how people feel about the combat is pretty mixed. You might like it, you might not. I think it's just one of those things you have to try out and for yourself to decide. But for me, at least, I didn't really like it. And moving on to the last main point, we have the story, which I know a lot of people don't really care about in an Assassin's Creed game, but I decided to cover it anyway. So, the story starts off pretty strong, and I was decently interested in what was going to happen, as it did look promising. But within the first third or towards the halfway mark, the story started to go downhill. It made very little use of the main supporting cast, quite a few of which I liked, until the later stages of the game. And yet it expected me to feel attached to characters I knew very little about. They were very simply underdeveloped, would be the way I'd put it. I knew very little about their history or motive, which left me questioning why a lot of things were happening that just didn't seem to make sense. The story also becomes very predictable after about the halfway mark. Hell, one of the item descriptions in the menus basically spoils one of the game's so-called big twist moments, well ahead of it happening, which was pretty stupid. So the story and its characters were definitely a wasted opportunity in my opinion. And like I said, I know a lot of people don't really care about the story, but still, I personally would like to see some improvements in the future games. You know, maybe some real player-driven choices. That would be nice. You know, do I keep to the Assassin's Creed or do I break it? Do I work with Templars when it's necessary? And how would my fellow Assassins react to it? Maybe even a game where what side you're on isn't predetermined, but decided through your actions. I think stuff like that would be really interesting. Now, Unity also has the ability to play cooperative in a variety of missions, and I would have liked to give it a go. But for me at least, it's just not working. Most of the time I can't seem to find anyone to play with, and even when I can, either of us can get disconnected randomly for like no reason. It also seems that all of the multiplayer systems, like the stupid companion app and the Initiates website, which locks part of the game's content, those being all those blue and yellow chests you've seen running around, you can't access them unless you use that, and they're not working. So, for example, I should be able to open most of the yellow chests, as I should have a really high initiate level, as I have all the Assassin's Creed games and I've beaten them all. But I can't access the chest because the website upload is not working. I think that's indicative of Unity on a whole. It's just all these things tied together, and when a couple of them aren't working, the whole thing falls down. So with all that said, what's my conclusion on Unity? Well, I feel that for every step forward Unity takes, it ends up going 2 steps back. So much of it is just broken at the moment that I can't really recommend it for anyone. And I think the best course of action, if you're a fan of the franchise and still really want to play it, would be to wait a few months and hopefully it will get fixed and you can buy it on sale. Because once fixed, I think it will be a decent experience, if a little bit on the weak side, compared to some of the other games in the franchise, but in the state it's currently in, it earns my spot for the worst Assassin's Creed game to date. Yes, even worse than 3. At least I enjoyed some of my time with 3, mainly the ship combat. I enjoyed very little of Unity. So my final score for Assassin's Creed Unity is a 4 out of 10, and it's lucky to get that. Mainly because I had a PC powerful enough to run it. God help those trying to play this on a mid or low end PC, let alone the consoles. I don't even want to think about that. Now, I don't mind if you're among the people who didn't like the direction Black Flag took and wanted a return to the more traditional Assassin's Creed. That's fine. You got Unity and we got Rogue. But seeing people and gaming outlets say this is the best Assassin's Creed game ever made and giving it 9s and 10s is just bullshit. The game is broken, and even fixed, I would only say it sits around the level of Brotherhood as far as quality and enjoyment goes. But let me know what you guys think about it. I, for one, am happy to be able to set this aside and move on. I might come back to it once they have fixed the problems, but by then I'll likely already be playing Rogue. But anyway, as always, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that stuff. But regardless, thanks to everyone for watching, and I hope you all have a good day.